So imagine your teacher gives you an assignment, right? But this isn't your standard baking soda volcano for the school science fair.
Right. Definitely not a volcano.
No, this assignment comes straight from the highest levels of the military. And your objective is to literally engineer a real-life superhero.
Which sounds completely crazy.
It really does. You have to take a normal domestic pet and crossbreed it with an apex wild predator. And, if you fail, the security of an entire national border is basically compromised.
No pressure at all, right?
Yeah, zero pressure. But if you succeed, you've created this absolute biological marvel. And the wild thing is, this isn't a comic book plot. It's a declassified Cold War experiment.
It really is one of the most fascinating pieces of history.
Exactly. So today we are doing a deep dive into this. We're looking at a huge stack of sources, official FCI standards, which is the Fédération Cynologique Internationale. We've got historical records from Czech and Slovak breeding clubs and, some really dense scientific articles about genetics.
Yeah, the source material is incredibly detailed.
It is. And our mission today is to explore the origin of the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog, or Československý vlčák. But specifically, we really want to look at the intense, decades-long battle to get this wild hybrid officially recognized as a real breed, both at home and globally.
Because, creating the animal was just the first hurdle.
Right.
A bigger challenge was actually forcing the established dog world to accept a creature that it totally challenged their century-old rules of what a dog should even be.
So set the stage for us. Where does this whole crazy story actually start?
Well, to really grasp this, put yourself in Czechoslovakia, right?
Yeah.
The year is 1955.
Okay, 1955.
The Cold War is heavily entrenched. It's a very tense time. And the border guards, the Pohraniční stráž, they have this massive problem. They are tasked with guarding the Iron Curtain.
And we aren't talking about like a flat road with a fence and a little toll booth.
Not at all.
We're talking about the Umava Mountains. If you've ever experienced really bad winter cold waiting for a bus, multiply that by 100.
Yeah, it's a totally unforgiving environment.
It's extreme weather, freezing dampness, deep snow, super rugged terrain.
Right. And it's a biome that will literally break your body down if you weren't built for it. So the border guards were running these constant, grueling patrols, and they relied entirely on their working dogs.
Which at the time were German Shepherds, right?
Exactly, German Shepherds. And look, German Shepherds are brilliant. They are highly trainable, super loyal. They were great in urban combat. But in this specific, brutal microclimate in the mountains, they were fundamentally failing.
Wait, failing how? Because, when you picture a German Shepherd, you think of a tough police dog. They aren't exactly fragile little lap dogs.
No, they aren't fragile in short bursts.
Yeah.
But living and working in that freezing dampness year-round, the military vets were seeing severe breakdown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The dogs were burning so many calories just trying to stay warm that they suffered from chronic exhaustion. Plus, the constant freezing moisture was giving them severe kidney diseases and joint degradation.
Man, so they were just physically falling apart.
They were. A dog would go out on patrol, come back completely depleted, and they wouldn't recover in time for the next shift.
So from a military logistics standpoint, their equipment is basically breaking down faster than they can fix it.
Right. They needed a massive upgrade. And that exact problem lands on the desk of a guy named Carol Hartle.
Carol Hartle.
Yeah. He was the head of military cynology. So the guy in charge of dog training and breeding for the border guards. And Hartle realized you can't just train a dog to not freeze.
Right, you can't teach genetics.
Exactly. You have to change the physiology.
Yeah.
So he had this radical idea. He looked at the German Shepherd's amazing obedience and thought, what if we transplant that brain into a biologically superior body?
And what's the ultimate survival machine in the European mountains? The Carpathian wolf. It's been leveled up by nature for thousands of years to survive that exact biome.
Precisely. It was the ultimate biological stat mixing. Hartle wanted to combine the obedience of the dog with the endurance, night vision, and weather resistance of the wild wolf.
It's basically like building a character in an RPG. You want the endurance stats of the wolf, but you need to keep the obedience stats of the dog.
That's a great way to look at it. But we have to remember, this wasn't some fun public project. Hartle wasn't trying to make a cool new pet for people to show off.
Right. This was a highly classified military experiment, a real mad scientist phase.
Exactly. And they were super rigorous about it.
Right.
They worked with the Czechoslovak Academy of Sciences. They set up a secure lab in Lebiovis in South Bohemia.
But wait, mechanically, how does that even work? Because if a wild wolf's entire survival instinct is to avoid humans and domestic dogs, How do you even get them to mate?
It was incredibly difficult.
I mean, you can't just put them in a room together and put on romantic music. The wolf would probably attack the dog.
Oh, absolutely. A wild wolf usually sees a domestic dog as a threat, or, worse, as prey. So they had to heavily manage the socialization. The first successful pairing was a wild she-wolf named Britta,
Okay, Britta.
and they had to very slowly get her used to a specific, super dominant German Shepherd named Cesar. It took a long time for her to just accept him in her territory without getting aggressive.
But it actually worked. I mean, the records show on May 26, 1958, they had the very first successful litter. Brita and Cesar produced what they call the F1 generation.
Right, the F1 generation. Genetically, that's a 50-50 split
Yep.
between wolf and dog. And the military scientists just obsessed over these puppies. They were testing something called endogenic activity.
Okay, wait. Endogenic activity. Break that down for us. Does that just mean how fast they run?
No, it's way deeper. It's about internal biological rhythms. Circadian rhythms, cell energy production, adrenaline. They tracked these F1 hybrids for 24-hour cycles and compared them to pure German Shepherds.
And what happened?
The hybrids basically mirrored wolves. They had these massive bursts of sustained energy at dawn and dusk. Their overall stamina completely destroyed the domestic dogs.
Wow. So Hartle won, right? Day one, he maxed out the endurance stats.
Physically, yes, total success. Behaviorally, the F1 generation was an absolute disaster for the military.
Let me guess. The wild wolf brain took over.
Dominantly so. In the wild, extreme fear of new things. Neophobia is a survival trait. If you aren't scared in the wild, you die.
Right.
So these F1 pups inherited that wild wiring. They were tough, sure, but they were incredibly skittish. They hated humans. You could not train them to do complex border patrol commands.
Yeah, you can't have a border guard dog that just runs and hides in a bush every time a twig snaps.
Exactly.
So 50-50 is a bust. What do they do next? How do they fix the stats?
Well, they had to dilute the wildness while trying to keep the physical upgrades. It's kind of like making sourdough bread.
Okay, I like food analogies.
If you use pure wild yeast starter, the bread is way too sour. So you take a tiny bit of that starter and you mix it with a ton of regular flour to dilute it.
Got it. So they took the best F1 pups and bred them back to pure German Shepherds.
Right, creating the F2 generation. Now it's mathematically around 25% wolf.
And they kept going, right?
Yeah, they evaluated the F2s, found them still a bit too wild, so they bred them to German Shepherds again for the F3 generation,
Yeah.
and then again for the F4 generation.
And the sources note they didn't just use one or two German Shepherds. They used over 40 different purebreds to make sure they didn't create this, like, super inbred, unhealthy family line.
Which was so smart. By the time they hit the F4 generation, the wolf blood was diluted down to about 6.25%.
The magic number, 6.25%.
That was the threshold. At that level, they kept the wolf's weatherproof coat, the lung capacity, the crazy senses. But their brains finally crossed the line. They could finally bond with a human handler.
Okay, so boom. They did it. They built the super dog. You would think the military would be throwing a parade for Hartle. Why wasn't this immediately rolled out across the whole Iron Curtain?
Because living animals aren't math equations.
Right.
Even in the F4 generation, the genetics were basically a dice roll. Behavior is complex. So in one litter, you might get a perfect soldier dog, but its brother might act completely feral and shy.
So the consistency just wasn't there.
Exactly. And the military hates unpredictability. A dog is viewed as equipment. If your life depends on your equipment in the dark, you need to know exactly how it works every single time.
You can't have a gun that decides it doesn't feel like shooting today.
Right. So the military just lost interest. The program was expensive, the dogs were inconsistent, and by 1965, the official experiment was shut down.
Wow.
They got the data they wanted, but the animal itself was basically fired.
And honestly, that should have been the end of it. The file goes in a cabinet, the dogs live out their lives, and we never hear about it again. But Hartle just refuses to let his project die.
He was completely obsessed with the potential. He believed if civilian breeders just kept working at it, they could smooth out that inconsistency. But to do that, he had to take it to the public sector.
And this is where the story shifts, right? It goes from a cool science experiment to just a brutal bureaucratic war. Because as soon as he steps out of the lab, he hits this massive wall of haters.
Oh, the backlash was intense. In 1966, Hartle actually drafts the very first official standard for the breed. He writes down the height, the coat, the temperament, and submits it.
And the dog world completely freaks out. It's like trying to start a really weird new club at school, and the traditional sports teams actively try to shut you down because they think you're ruining the school's reputation.
That's exactly what it was like. The loudest haters were the German Shepherd purists. They'd spent decades perfecting their dogs. And then Harville shows up with a dog that looks and acts like a wolf.
And they saw it as a threat.
A massive threat. They viewed it as a biological contaminant. They were terrified that if this wolf dog became official, bad breeders might eventually mix it back into pure German Shepherd lines and ruin decades of hard work.
It's total gatekeeping.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in 1960s, communist Czechoslovakia, the gatekeepers had all the power. You couldn't just start an indie kennel club in your garage.
Right. You needed the government to say yes.
Everything had to be approved by state umbrella organizations. The big one for working dogs was called Svazarm.
The Union for Cooperation with the Army?
Yes. If Svazarm said no, your breed legally did not exist. You couldn't do dog shows. You couldn't issue pedigrees.
So Hartle submits his standard in 1966, and Swazarm rejects it. But he doesn't quit. By 1970, civilians actually own about 56 of these dogs, so he applies again.
Rejected
He
again.
waits another 6 years. The dogs are doing great. It's 1976. He applies a third time.
Rejected for a third time.
What was their excuse? I mean, the government literally paid to create the dog.
The official bureaucratic excuse was always, there aren't enough dogs. They claimed the population was too small and would just become dangerously inbred.
But they started with over 40 different German Shepherds. Biologically, that makes no sense.
It didn't make sense. It was a smokescreen. Svizarm was just heavily influenced by the German Shepherd lobby, plus bureaucrats hate risk.
Oh, sure. If they approve a half-wolf and it bites someone, they get fired.
Exactly. It was much safer for their careers to just pretend the dog didn't exist.
Which is such crazy irony. The state military made the dog, but the state civilian office refuses to acknowledge it. So the breed is basically trapped in this weird legislative vacuum. It's a ghost dog.
And being a ghost breed usually means extinction. Without a registry, breeders can't track bloodlines. The Czech program under Hartle was really starting to stagnate. They hit a wall.
But right when things look totally hopeless in the Czech Republic, the dog gets saved by a completely new champion over in Slovakia.
Yes. Enter Major František Rosic.
The spiritual father of the breed.
He was a military kinologist stationed in Malacky, Slovakia, and his approach was totally different from Hartle's.
Yeah, the sources make it clear Hartle was the academic. He wanted data. Rosic was the boots-on-the-ground guy.
Rosic was incredibly pragmatic. He knew that if the military was tossing these dogs out and the registries wouldn't take them, the only way to save them was to give them directly to the people.
Which sparks this amazing civilian underground movement.
Because the military was phasing out the F3 and F4 generations, there were all these surplus pups. Rosic and some other guards just started quietly handing them out to civilians.
The records say they did this on reverse, which is basically a sneaky bureaucratic loophole, right?
Right. It meant the civilian took physical possession of the dog, unofficially, under the table. It was this total grassroots rebellion.
I just love the idea of people in a strict communist state secretly raising classified military wolf hybrids in their backyards just to prove the government wrong.
It was amazing. And Rosic didn't just hand them out. He managed the genetics. He saw the gene pool was getting stale, so he brought in a third wild wolf.
Right, we had Britta, then another wolf named Argo early on, and now wolf number 3.
Shurik, a wild male Carpathian wolf. In 1974, Rosic carefully crossed Shurik with some F3 and F4 females. It injected all this fresh, healthy, wild DNA into the Slovak lines.
And this underground network just explodes. People are trading puppies, taking them to farms, doing obedience training. They're basically proving in real time that these dogs are totally fine.
And finally, the sheer weight of reality broke the bureaucracy. There were just too many successful dogs to ignore.
Which brings us to a massive date, March 20th, 1982.
Yes, the Breeders' Club of the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog was officially founded in Brno. After decades of fighting, the dog was finally recognized as a national breed.
The ghost dog gets its paperwork. But there's a really cool detail about the name. Hartle originally wanted to call it the Czech Wolf Dog, but by 1982 they changed it.
It was a compromise. The Czechs started the science, but the Slovaks literally saved the breed from extinction and built the numbers. So to honor both, it became the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog.
And the first 43 puppies were officially registered in Prague. It's a huge win.
It was. But national recognition is kind of like winning your regional track meet. Hartl and Rosick wanted to go to the Olympics.
Right. They wanted international recognition from the FCI.
Exactly.
Right.
They applied for FCI Group 1, which is sheepdogs and cattle dogs. It's a highly respected working group.
And the FCI doesn't just hand out trophies for a cool backstory. You have to prove the dog actually works. They had to prove the wolf DNA made the dog physically better than normal dogs.
And to prove that mathematically to international judges, they used the endurance tests, or SVP.
And the numbers on these tests are just insane.
They are designed to push canine biology to the absolute breaking point. It's a continuous run alongside a handler on a bicycle.
Level 1 is 40 kilometers, level 2 is 70 kilometers, and level 3, I had to read this twice, is 100 kilometers.
That's roughly 62 miles.
2 human marathons back to back. If you force a regular, highly fit police dog to run 100 kilometers on a hard surface, they would literally collapse.
Their core temperature would spike dangerously, and their paw pads would be completely destroyed.
But the wolf dog just crushed it.
They dominated. Because of something called the suspended trot, the wolf's skeleton is built differently. They have a narrow chest and joint angles that let them fall into this low-energy rhythm.
It's an economy of motion regular dogs don't have.
Exactly. The official data showed these dogs running 100 kilometers at an average speed of 11 to 13 kilometers an hour.
And the veterinary checks afterwards are the craziest part. Normal dogs would have bloody, torn-up paws.
But the Wolfdog pads showed almost no wear. They inherited this super thick layer of keratin and a specialized vascular system that basically cools the paw down while they run.
They have all-terrain, self-cooling tires for feet.
And their metabolic recovery was even wilder. After a 100K run, a normal dog needs days to clear lactic acid. The wolf dogs needed about 7 hours of sleep, and their baselines were totally back to normal.
They could wake up and run another marathon. It's a superpower. Hartl's 1955 theory was proven right on the track.
And they didn't stop at bicycle tests. They took it to the snow, mushing.
Dog sled racing, the ultimate endurance test. In 1988, Peter Kratkovsky took a team of wolf dogs to a 12-kilometer race in Slovakia.
And who did they race against? The Nordic breeds. Huskies, Malamutes, dogs bred for thousands of years, specifically to pull sleds in the snow.
And the newcomers, these military experiments, completely swept the podium, first, second, and third place. They beat the Huskies at their own game.
It was undeniable proof.
Yeah.
Armed with all this data and some heavy diplomatic lobbying from Petr Dvořák, they went back to the FCI.
And on June 13th, 1989, in Helsinki, the FCI says yes, standard number 332.
But, and this is crucial, it was only provisional recognition.
So a trial period.
Right, a strict 10-year probation.
Yeah.
The FCI essentially said, great data, but your gene pool is small and you have a history of unstable behavior. You have 10 years to prove the breed won't collapse.
So the clock starts. They just need to keep their heads down until 1999. But halfway through probation, a massive geopolitical earthquake happens.
The country of Czechoslovakia literally ceases to exist.
On January 1st, 1993, the Velvet Divorce happens. The country splits into the Czech Republic and Slovakia.
Peacefully, yes, but for the dog breed, it was a total logistical nightmare.
Yeah, what happens to a Czechoslovakian dog when there is no Czechoslovakia?
The FCI has a strict rule. Every breed needs one country of patronage that controls the official standard. When the country split, the Unified Dog Club violently fractured into a Czech club and a Slovak club.
And both sides thought the dog belonged to them. The Czechs had Hartl and the science. The Slovaks had Rosick and the civilian numbers.
The FCI basically forced them into a room to figure it out. On July 4, 1993, they signed a treaty.
The agreement was that the historical country of origin would always be Czechoslovakia, that the actual power, the patronage, went to Slovakia.
The Slovak Union became the legal guardian of the rulebook. And naturally, massive friction started immediately. The original Czech architects now had to follow Slovak rules.
And the sources show this led to actual biological arguments, specifically what I call the teeth drama.
The dental standard is still controversial today. See, a pure wolf has a long jaw and 42 perfectly spaced teeth. Over millennia, domestic dogs develop shorter muzzles, so they often just genetically drop a few premolars because they don't fit.
So when you mix a wolf and a German shepherd, you're crashing two totally different jaw blueprints together.
Right. Missing premolars became a very common genetic fault. The Czech purists, sticking to Hartl's vision, demanded that the standards strictly require all 42 teeth. If a dog was missing a tooth, it couldn't breed.
But the Slovaks, who now wrote the rules, looked at it pragmatically. If they banned every dog missing a tooth, the gene pool would shrink so fast they'd get massive inbreeding health defects.
So the Slovak club officially changed the FCI standard. They allowed dogs missing specific premolars to still get an excellent rating.
They changed the biological rulebook and allegedly did it without the Czech club's full agreement.
The Czech traditionalists felt it was watering down the wolf purity just to make dog shows easier. It's the exact same Hartl versus Rosick debate all over again.
But despite the infighting, they both had to face 1999, the end of probation.
The final defense at the FCI General Assembly in Mexico City. Wittefan Tevfik from Slovakia presented a decade of data.
He proved the dogs were thriving, the genetics were stable, and they were adapting to normal civilian life.
And it worked. On June 1st, 1999, the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog finally gained definitive, permanent international recognition.
Which is just incredible. From a secret 1950s border guard experiment through all the bureaucratic hate, saved by civilians, beating huskies, surviving a country collapsing, all the way to global victory in Mexico City.
It absolutely secured its place in history. But that brings us to the really interesting modern question. Who actually owns these dogs today?
Right. If you had to guess where the biggest population is, you'd think the Czech Republic or Slovakia. Right. But you'd be completely wrong.
The demographic center completely shifted southward.
The biggest population on Earth is in Italy.
The Italian boom is fascinating.
The first dogs went to a show in Italy around 1995. And the public just lost their minds. Like, the home countries might register maybe 50 to 200 puppies a year. Italy was suddenly registering up to 1,200 puppies a year.
It's like an indie band from your hometown becoming stadium rock stars in a totally different country.
Why Italy, though? Why does a freezing weather mountain dog become a huge status symbol in the Mediterranean?
It comes down to cultural psychology. In Italy, the wolf isn't just an animal, it's a massive mythology. Romulus and Remus were nursed by a wild she-wolf. The wolf is the symbol of Rome, of ancient power and nobility.
So they saw this dog and it just clicked with their deepest cultural myths. They wanted the aesthetic of the wild.
Exactly. And speaking of that wild aesthetic, modern science just recently blew up everything we thought we knew about their genetics.
Oh yeah, this part is wild. So Hartl's math aimed for 6.25% wolf blood, right? For decades, everyone just assumed these dogs were 6% wolf.
Until 2015, when a huge DNA study mapped their entire genome. And the results were a total shock. The modern dog isn't 6% wolf. They carry anywhere from 25 to 30% wild wolf DNA.
Almost a third of their DNA is wolf. How? They stopped adding wild wolves in 1983. They only ever used 4 wild wolves in total: Brita, Argo, Zurich, and Lejdi.
It comes down to how humans select traits. Breeders were constantly picking the puppies that look the most like wolves. The yellow eyes, the silver coat, the mask.
Selecting for the phenotype.
Right. But genes are physically linked on chromosomes. When breeders pick the wolfy-looking traits, they accidentally drag along huge chunks of adjacent wolf DNA. Over generations, the wild DNA actually concentrated back up to 30%.
They accidentally reverse-engineered the dilution. And there's one more crazy genetic finding.
The Y chromosome. The maternal lines trace back to German Shepherds. But the Y chromosome, passed from father to son, is totally unique. The modern Czechoslovakian Wolfdog has a Y chromosome haplotype that does not exist in any other domestic dog on the planet.
It's an unbroken line straight back to those wild Carpathian fathers. So you have a dog that looks like a wolf and is 30% wolf. What is it actually like to have one in your living room?
The FCI standard is very clear. This is not a dog for beginners. If you want a golden retriever in a wolf suit, you will be miserable.
The behavioral standard uses the term purposeful behavior, or uchilové chování. What does that mean in real life?
It means they don't do things just to make you happy. They evaluate if an action benefits them. It's wild problem-solving intelligence.
Like, if you throw a stick for a normal dog, it'll fetch it 50 times just because you said so.
Right, the repetition is the reward.
But if you throw a stick for a wolf dog,
it might fetch it once out of curiosity.
Yeah.
If you throw it again, it's going to look at you like, I just brought that to you. You obviously don't want it. I'm not wasting my energy getting it again.
You can't just bully them into obedience. You have to convince them it's worth it.
Exactly. You need to be a leader they respect. And then there is the pack instinct.
Yeah, how does a 30% wolf handle living with humans?
Intensely. Your family is their absolute pack. They form incredibly deep neurological bonds, which sounds great, but it means they get severe separation anxiety. You can't leave them alone in an apartment for 10 hours a day.
And if they get lonely, they don't just chew up a shoe, right? They don't really bark.
Barking is a domestic trait. When a wolf dog is lonely, it howls.
And not a cute little whimper. The military logs say it's a piercing, far-carrying howl meant to cut through miles of mountain forest to find lost pack members.
Yeah, if you live in the suburbs and your dog starts calling the pack at 2 in the afternoon, your neighbors are going to call the cops.
So, summarizing this whole crazy journey, we start in 1955 with a classified experiment to build a super dog.
Right, scientists diluting wolf blood to capture physical superpowers.
Then the dog gets rejected by the government, trapped in a bureaucratic nightmare.
Only to be saved by a rebellious underground network of civilians and Major Rosic.
They outrun huskies in the snow, survive their country splitting in half, argue over teeth, and finally conquer the global stage in Mexico City.
And today, they are thriving globally, carrying a third of their wild DNA.
It's an unbelievable story of stubbornness, but, zooming out, it really makes you think differently about humans and nature.
It really does. For tens of thousands of years, our whole goal was to breed the wildness out of the wolf. We wanted submissive, easy pets. We tried to erase the wild.
But with the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog, we spent 50 years and massive scientific effort trying to put the wildness back in.
We systematically reverse-engineered domestication. And the fact that this stubborn, independent wild animal is now so popular, it poses a really profound question. Are we breeding them because we arrogantly think we finally mastered nature? Or, as our modern lives get more synthetic and predictable, are we subconsciously realizing that the deep, untamed spirit of the wild is exactly what we need back in our lives?
Are we trying to control the wild, or are we just desperately trying to reconnect with it? That is something to keep chewing on. Thank you for joining us on this massive deep dive into the politics, the science, and the triumph of the Czechoslovakian Wolfdog. Keep asking questions, keep digging into the history around you, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.